The crab mentality. Just
Yeah.
like expand on that a little bit. Like what do you mean exactly? And are you still face that? It sounds like.
Oh, are we recording? Are we ready to rock and roll?
We're ready to rock and roll. We're going, man.
Let's go. All
Let's just
right,
go
cool.
right into it, man.
Yeah. No, so all right. So if you're not familiar with how they catch crabs, crabs are caught by putting a cage, dropping it down to the bottom of the sea floor, right, and putting a little bit of bait in the middle. And the crabs all around the sea floor, they come over, they climb up the sides of the cage, and they climb into the cage, and they start eating the bait. And all of a sudden, all the other crabs see it, and they're all following suit, and they're jumping in, and all of a sudden, there's all these crabs continuing jumping into the cage, even after all the bait is gone. There's still crabs climbing into the cage, right? And they're all just kind of hanging out. As soon as one of the crabs realizes that, hey, there's no more food in here anymore, what are we doing? They start climbing up the side of the cage. The other crabs are so uncomfortable about the change in status quo that they start pulling that crab off of the sidewall, and to the point where they'll pull that crab off and rip its limbs off or even kill it because of that. So crab mentality comes from that mentality. How many people in your life do you engage with who you're like, hey, I got big goals, I have big ambitions, I want to go and buy this big business, I want to go and grow my apartment portfolio, I want to go and do all these amazing things, and they say, hey, Brian, let's not do anything crazy, let's not do anything too risky, why don't you play it safe, right? And whether they are intentionally doing this or unintentionally doing this, dude, they're pulling us. We're trying to climb out of the cage, man. We're trying to go on to better things in life, and they're dragging us down. They're pulling us down. And I think some people might do it unintentionally, but I think a lot of people do it intentionally as well.
Out of what?
Dude,
Like, why would they be doing it intentionally?
Dude, because you doing bigger things makes them introspective. It makes them turn the mirror back on themselves and think about all the things they're not doing to advance their family, to advance their goals, to advance their ambitions, and how they're just kind of laissez-faire of sticking with the status quo. And it makes them feel so uncomfortable about you going and doing bigger things that they got to drag you down, dude. They got to pull you down back to their level. And I think Jim Rohn talks about it. He's like, success is really going in the opposite direction of that normal negative downward pull, right? Like think about the seed that takes root and then starts growing up against gravity, right? Like gravity's trying to pull it down. That seed is pushing up against gravity. And success happens, man, when you go against the grain, when you go against what everybody else is saying, when those crabs are trying to pull you down, you got to overcome and still climb back out, kick them off, man. So everybody in my life falls into one of three categories. It's increased association, decreased association, or disassociation. And the increased association, guys like you, right? People who are ambitious, who are going in the same direction, who believe and support my hopes and dreams and goals and all the things I want to accomplish. And we got a common future together, not just a common past. You know what I mean? Those are increased association. People that I intentionally surround myself with in a lot of these mastermind groups, for instance. Decreased association. These are people that don't necessarily fully support you and your dreams and your goals, but you can't totally get rid of them, typically because they have the same last name as you, right? So, or your wife or your spouse, you know what I mean? So those people you want to decrease association with. You can't totally disassociate with them, but you can limit the association, right? See them at the holidays, be friendly over the course of a weekend, once a quarter, whenever you see them, because they're in town visiting you or whatever that looks like. Your buddies from high school and college who you love, but they're complacent, right? And they're not really doing anything. And the conversations start with, hey, remember when? Hey, remember when we got drunk? Hey, remember when we won that baseball game, that football game, that basketball game? Like back, remember that 3-point shot at the buzzer? Like, dude, those conversations are fun kind of to reminisce on, but dude, when conversations start with that, remember when? Like, they're living in a place that I don't live in any longer, right? I'm thinking about where we're going, not where we're coming from. And I respect those relationships and I love those guys. It's just, we're on different paths, right? Like I think if you're not growing, you're dying. And for me, I always want to be growing. And then there's the disassociation. This one's pretty easy, right? Anybody who doesn't believe in you, who doesn't support you, anybody who tries to pull you down, the crab mentality, the people on social media who talk smack. Dude, I used to let that stuff, first of all, it got to me initially, and I just closed down and stopped, giving out, producing content. And then eventually I matured to the level of, I just talk smack back to them. And I'd be like, oh yeah, F me, F you kind of a thing. And like, oh yeah, forget you, dude. You're probably in your mom's basement. And I'd talk a bunch of smack back to them. And then I was like, no, dude, the ultimate maturity level is just delete, ignore, disassociate, block, get them out of your life. And dude, if you look at my social media posts, I have a lot of positive people on there. And if I go through like, dude, there's not anybody who comes in and talks smack really. Occasionally on the political type stuff, which I try to stay away from, but people start getting political and all of a sudden it goes down a rabbit hole, and you know what that's like. But dude, everybody on my news feed, everybody's doing amazing things. Everybody's loving it. Everybody's liking it. And it's not just my posts, it's other people's posts. I see the people that I've been very intentional of increasing association with, and I do that on social media. Dude, it's amazing to see the progress and the momentum and all the good uplifting things that people are talking about on Facebook, because I've only associated with those people, and I've disassociated with anybody who was negative. I don't have time to even go back and forth with people. I just delete them, I unfriend them, and if it's bad enough, I'll block them. So that's been, and I've been intentional about that for the past several years, 3-4 years. So that's why I've gotten this momentum of just amazing rock stars, in my sphere.
Michael Jordan would say, "Bring that on. That fuels me. That keeps me going." What keeps you going? You're doing so many big things right now, Tim. And every time I see you mention these posts, you're getting 400, 500, 600 likes and hundreds of comments. People are genuinely interested and invested, at least emotionally, in what it is you're doing, because I think a lot of us saw you come up.
Yeah.
What drives you? What drives you to keep going right now?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think early on, right, it was money, and I wanted to make money, and that's why I got involved in real estate and all that kind of stuff. Since I got involved in started getting a little bit more active on social media. Now, dude, it was never intentional actually early on. It was just me sharing the idea that, hey, you don't have to have your value, your worth dictated by your boss or some faceless corporation, right? Like, you can actually take over control of your net worth and your value. And dude, can you imagine going to work for somebody else and having to ask when to go to the bathroom, when you can take a lunch break, when you can take a vacation? Can you imagine being a grown adult and asking somebody else when you can go to, dude, that boggles my mind. And so it boggles my mind so much. Can you imagine driving to work in rush hour traffic? Oh my gosh. I would be an entrepreneur just to not have to do that. And I think people are so just programmed by going through life of going to school and getting good grades to get a good job, that it comes to a point where it's like, this is all I know. This is all I have to do. This is the ants marching type of thing. And dude, I got a real rise out of just letting people know that you don't have to do that, right? Instead of waiting for a 3% raise at the end of the year, go buy a single family rental house, right? And make an extra $300 a month in positive cash flow that produces, what is that? $3,600 a year. You make 50 grand, and all of a sudden, dude, you got a 7-8% raise on something you actually control, right? How many times can you do that? What if you go and buy an apartment building that produces 75 grand a year? That one apartment gave you 150% raise, you don't have to let somebody else dictate your worth. And that, seeing other people realize that, has become really a big driving force for me, helping other people see themselves as more with my help, right, than they could have seen themselves without my help. That's a big driving force for me. I used to want to help a lot of other people. My goal was 1,000 people become millionaires. That means I created $1 billion of value and net worth in the marketplace. Now, with all the stuff that's going on with politically, COVID, all the other things, dude, I think more than ever, people are just again, in that ants marching mindset, and we just need awesome leaders. So now my goal isn't to help 1,000 people make $1 million. It's help 1,000 people become leaders that can then each help another 1,000 people. Now I created $1 trillion of value in the marketplace. So I love the education side for that, and we can just do a lot of really, really cool things. And it helps, obviously in self-interest, it helps build the portfolio because we joint venture with our students, and I bring money to their deals. They bring money to my deals. I buy deals from them. They buy deals from me. And like, it helps the business from a self-interest standpoint. But really, dude, I love the education. Like, if you took a look at, and I've done this exercise, actually, Francis Ablola actually helped me out with it a couple of years ago. And he was like, here's all the things that you spend your time on. Now let's rank where you get the most fulfillment out of all those things and all this other jazz. And I went through this exercise, and it was like the education, the masterminds, the coaching, check 9 out of 10 boxes for me. And that was like, from a self-fulfillment standpoint, it drove me more than anything else. So I love the education side. I love it.
So it's really interesting. It kind of brings me to this: the coaching, the education, the mentoring, the helping people. And you mentioned like the ants marching and kind of some people are kind of programmed a certain way. Surely you come across some people who have either entered your program or just come to your events, which we're going to talk about, by the way, here in a minute, but that are just so ingrained in that mentality and don't have the drive and ambition. Tim, can that stuff be taught? Can you really reprogram anyone's mind? Or is it that's just kind of who we are?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, dude. I was wrestling with this last year, right? Because my program's always been scaling from single family into apartments. So I never really had a lot of the newbies come through my stuff until last year. With COVID and everything, I bought my brand. I reduced the price of my commercial empire event, and I started getting a few more like newbies kind of coming in. I got more active on Instagram and TikTok, and all of a sudden, like, hey man, I'm 16 years old. I want to buy my first rental property, or hey, I want to do this. And which is really cool, really inspiring, because I wasn't thinking about doing that stuff when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And then when I got into the kids' books, like how my little legacy library, which is my children's books, it takes kind of the best or some of the most impactful personal development books: Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Magic of Thinking Big, Power of Positive Thinking, Richest Man in Babylon. And we created kids versions of each of those books.
Yeah, one of those.
There you go, man. Big, impactful, amazing. I got reprogrammed from those books. So the whole idea behind Little Legacy Library, which is my kids' books, was, what if we just programmed our kids the right way from the get-go, right? And at 5, 6, 7 years old, they understood these concepts of setting a goal and sacrificing things that you like for something that really is more important to you, right? And they understand the concepts of leadership and actually caring about what other people are saying and utilizing their name in conversation and having influence and developing that influence. And, the basic steps of investing, of earn money, save money, invest your money, right? Instead of earn money, spend your money. And that's the cycle that everybody goes through. So I do believe if we're programmed one way, dude, we could definitely reprogram it. I'd rather people be programmed from a younger age the right way. Mm-hmm. And that's, the stuff and dude, it's not really like, some of it's programming, but most of it is just exposure to more ideas and thought principles and philosophy of how to make decisions and take information and then digest it and then throw away the stuff you don't like and keep the stuff that you do like.
For sure. Let me throw this in there too, because you mentioned this earlier as well. Risk tolerance, playing it safe. There comes a point to where not everybody has that in them to take big risk. Should we all, maybe it's age dependent, I don't know. Should we all be kind of taking risks, or where does that kind of play in?
Dude, a lot of that's programming, right? Whether you know it or you don't, that's hey, play it safe, be safe, stay with the group, like, how about all those things that our parents told us when we were younger? Stay with the group, don't talk to strangers, play it, make sure you're safe when you're out there. And that's meant to be good for kids, right? Like, we don't want our kids going out and talking to strangers. But think about us, dude. You and I were strangers before we met. All my private money lenders were strangers before we ever met. Mm-hmm. All my joint venture partners were strangers before we ever met. All my students were strangers before we ever, like, A stranger has everything you could possibly want in life. They could have the information, the resources, the connections, the friendship, anything you could possibly want comes from strangers. So when we're told don't talk to strangers for the first 15 years of our life, it gets a little bit difficult to talk to strangers, right? Words like a filthy rich, right? How are you going to associate with money once you start coming into money if you've always been told, oh, hey, that's a nice car. Yeah, I wonder who that guy screwed in order to make enough money to get that car, right? Whether you know it or not, you're being programmed from the older generation of these things that they say that create a certain financial blueprint for you and a mindset blueprint for you and me that we got to reprogram, right? And so I had to read all those books, man. I gave myself a master's degree in just personal development. And it was, dude, just inundating, working harder on myself than it ever was working on my business. But it laid the foundation, right? I had to work on myself inward. I had to build the root system before I was able to go up and grow the business, kind of a thing. But going back to your original question of like, can people get reprogrammed? Is this how we're born or whatever? I truly believe anybody can build a multiple 7-figure, maybe even up to an 8-figure business. I think anybody can do that. I think anybody can be an entrepreneur, build their own business, and become a millionaire, essentially. I think there's a certain psychology and maybe psychoticness in some of us that were reprogrammed in a certain way in order to become a billionaire. I think certain people are born to be 100 millionaires and billionaires, definitely billionaires, maybe not. I mean, maybe anybody could be 100 millionaire. I think anybody can make 7 figures and 8 figures and have that type of a business. I think certain people are programmed a different way, like a Donald Trump, definitely Elon Musk, right? Like a Bezos. And there's some of us that are just I think there's certain people that are born that just have this internal burning desire of like, what the hell drives you? I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. Like, and I think I have a little bit of that. I'm not where I want to be yet, but there's definitely like
you still have drive.
Obsession. Yeah, there's this obsession for achievement that I can't really quantify or figure out where it came from. And maybe it is something that maybe I wasn't born with it. Maybe it was something, I was one of the smaller kids in my grade. I was one of the younger kids in my grade. I always had to work harder than everybody else in order to play sports because I didn't have the physical advancements that everybody else had, right? Everybody else was going through puberty faster than I was. So maybe there was something like that where, in order to walk through the hallways with my buddies, I had to walk faster, right? In order to stay up with them. I had to run faster. I had to work harder in basketball and baseball because people could throw harder and had bigger muscles than I had. And maybe that's, conveyed into my business side of things, and it's why I keep pushing hard. Or maybe I was born with it. I don't know.
And things have changed too, Tim. Entrepreneurship 20 years ago wasn't really cool. Entrepreneurship was seen as risky, is seen as like you're going against the grain. We were kind of brought up. I think we're kind of same age. I'm 41. We were kind of brought up in the mentality that, hey, you got to go to college. You got to get a degree because that's kind of the way. That's changed at least a little bit in the last 5 to 10 years. I first kind of hear Gary Vee talking about this, how much things have changed. 15 and 6, well, shoot, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds right now can make $1 million on YouTube. I mean, you've got 15 and 16-year-olds or less making money on Twitch. Things have changed. Entrepreneurship has changed. So maybe some of that programming is changed. You mentioned your books, which I'm glad you did. I want you to talk about that a little bit more and how people can get those. But just talk about the little bit of change maybe that we're seeing in our society as well.
Yeah, man. I think the way that we're programmed early on is because that's how our parents were programmed, right? And they're the biggest influence in our life up until the age of 10, 12, 15 years old or whatever. And that's what they knew. They knew to go and work for a job for 40 years in order to retire. And then, and that was life, And so I don't think it's anything malicious. I think they thought that was the best way to go about doing that. And then with certain technologies and social media and advancements in Uber, right now anybody can be their own entrepreneur and go and drive an Uber car, or potentially Airbnb. You can arbitrage and rent an apartment then put it on Airbnb, like what Brian Page teaches in B&B formula, like some of these other things where you can generate revenue in different ways. Access to information is much different, right? So you don't have to go to university to go and get the knowledge. You can actually jump on YouTube and learn everything you need to know on how to be an entrepreneur. I think people call things risky when they don't know anything about it, you know? And to me, I mean, shoot, dude, what's a bigger risk? Is it a bigger risk to go and buy rental property and sit on that rental property for 30 years and let tenants pay every single month to pay for your asset that covers all the operating expenses, covers all the mortgage payments, and puts cash flow in your pocket? And then all of a sudden, 30 years from now, you're sitting on millions, if not tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of equity in properties? Or is it more risky to go and work for somebody else who dictates your value, who says what you're worth on an annual basis, that could fire you at the drop of a hat for any reason, for the most part, in order to hopefully they contribute 3% a year to your retirement account? Dude, when you rely on somebody else to build up your retirement, dude, divide by 10 of what that could be worth. If you take that over and you take responsibility of it, you can multiply it by 10 or even 100 of that. Dude, I think the real risk is going to work for somebody else for 40 years just to retire on less money than you couldn't live off of for that previous 40 years, and then hope the government's going to take care of you. That is risky to me.
Well, anytime you mention the G word, that's the ultimate risk in my book.
For sure, man. I don't understand, dude. It boggles my mind. And listen, dude, I'm pretty, I'm fiscally conservative. I'm actually socially pretty, in the middle, I would say. And I feel like a lot of people on the liberal side of things, economic, like they're like, oh no, the government will take care of it. Dude, the government doesn't give do you realize you're trying to give responsibility to the government, who wants more control over you because they don't think you're smart enough to make decisions about the money or the food that you eat or how you travel or your own health? Dude, they don't think you're smart enough. That's why the government wants control. And people are like, no, the government needs more. I'm like, dude, you really aren't smart enough if that's what you think. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, how does this not resonate with you?